Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video. First of all, before we get into anything else, I apologise if I sound sick. I am actually super sick right now. And yeah, my voice is just all croaky and I'm coughing a lung up. So I do apologise if I sound a little bit ill. But we're going to get into the video. For those of you that have been on my channel for a while, one of my most liked series is actually one where I went through every single weapons hype. And I talked about the best position, like the best armor setups, the best team comps to go around it, different synergies it has, and all that sort of stuff. And I figured with the new raid artifacts, maybe we can do that again. I'm going to be looking at doing a tier list and stuff like that as well. So lots of content to come out in the next couple of days. So yeah, so we're going to get into first ones first, swords. So I'm going to go through all the swords, talk through the abilities, what they do, what they synergize well with, and so on. So first ones first is the Broadsword. Going through the Q, Heroic Strike, 3-second cooldown. I kind of hope to see, I don't know, like it would be nice to see this on, do a little bit less damage on a 2-second cooldown to build them stacks a little bit quicker. Maybe we can actually see some different builds around that with like CDR and stuff, but 3-second cooldown, 5 energy cost, so you're not going to struggle for energy with this really. Cleave, a lot of people do actually use the cleave. It's a little bit more energy, but actually the damage you lose isn't much, and if you ever cleave, it's already worth it. You have, let's actually have a look at the, there we go. You have Interrupt, which deals an okay amount of damage, increases your auto attack damage for each stack of heroic charge you have on yourself during the interrupt. So if you have 3 stacks, you get 60% increased auto attack damage, which is pretty good. It's going to do a lot of single target damage. Interrupts typically nice if they've got something like an arcane or maybe a fire staff with pyroblast. There's a couple of different things you can potentially run it with. It's a very situational ability though. I wouldn't ever run this as just standard. I think it's something you've got to swap into. Iron Will. I think Iron Will is probably top 2 for sword Ws. Move speed is nice. Reducing damage done, obviously nice in itself. You can keep it up a decent amount of the time, a quarter of the time, as well as obviously any CDR you have. And yeah, it's just nice for playing around with swords, especially when you have the heroic charges. You're going to be moving around so quickly, and you're going to be pretty tanky, typically having the Sark in your offhand. Hamstring instantly slows the target enemy for 38% and deals 191 fizz damage. 10-second cooldown and a 15-second slow. You can keep this up for a good chunk of the time. Actually going to end up lasting about 8 seconds after cooldown, after CC reduction. But realistically, you're not going to be able to use it for GVGs or Hellgates. This is more of like a ganking sort of ideology, and that's not what you use Broadsword for. Splitting Slash. This is probably the other option. I would even go as far to say it's the best option at the moment for the W. Splits the earth in a straight line in front of you. Enemy hit will receive 429 damage. That can hit multiple people for 429 damage, which is actually quite a big hit, and a very small route, 15-second cooldown, and a 14-meter range, which is actually super long. So I would say this is probably the best W ability. Typically, using something like the Clarent blade, you're going to want to line your Splitting Slash up, hit as many people as you can, then go in and hit a massive mighty swing. Kind of a nice combo you can do. In terms of the Broadsword, let's talk about the E, and then we'll talk about like combos and stuff. Interrupts enemy spellcasting and deals physical damage to an enemy. Damage scales depending on the number of heroic charges active on you. All heroic charges will be consumed on hit. Additionally, your resistances are increased by 106 for 3 seconds, and it deals up to 849 damage, and obviously this is just 8.0. So the damage obviously scales with your item power. 10-second cooldown, which means you can actually just basically do this on cooldown every 10 seconds. You better put a lot of single target damage out. It's an interrupt as well. Again, we've talked about interrupts are very situational, so not going to be too good. The single target damage off it is awesome. The resistances obviously do help make you significantly tankier. The problem is it has no AoE pressure, so we see Last Mohicans run Broadsword occasionally, running that Stalker Hood Broadsword, where effectively if someone gets below 50%, he uses that Mortal Agony as well as the Mighty Blow to kind of just one-shot somebody. You can definitely do that, and I would say that's probably the best setup for the Broadsword. But yeah, other than that, I would say it's just the Clarent sort of weaker brother. The Claymore. Now, the Claymore is, I would have to say, probably the ganking weapon of the sword line. It's actually a very good ganking weapon. You see quite a few people running it. I would say if you're going to gank with it, use Heroic Strike, Hamstring, and then Charge. Charge towards an enemy, dealing 596 damage and temporarily pinning them to the spot. What's important to note about this, if you hit them once, you're still going to get a root. It's not going to be the full 7 seconds, but if you haven't got enough time, you can actually just E and do the damage, and just however many stacks you've got, you get a smaller root. You can actually do it with 0 as well, which is quite nice. So I'd say that's quite a key thing to do with it, because you just want to land that damage, I would say, if you're trying to gank with it. That and a Poison Potion, probably going to take off someone on a tier 5 horse, maybe. If you've got any mastery in it, then yeah, you're going to be doing some serious single target bursts with that. I would say it's a pretty decent ganking weapon. I think there are other options that are good with it, but I would say ganking as a whole is probably a team effort now more than anything else. So Claymore, pretty good for ganking. For GVGs, the Hellgates, and ZVZs, I would say it's not really worth it. Dual Swords. Now, Dual Swords are a weird one. I like Dual Swords in ZVZs. I think that's the only place they can potentially be used. Now, if you're going to use them in ZVZs, you want to Heroic Strike a frontliner. I would honestly say Iron Will is probably your best bet, but you can use Splitting Slash just to get that damage down. So effectively, ZVZ, obviously in ZVZs, tank's going to jump in, pull everyone in. Splitting Slash hitting all of them. A root is nice, that damage is going to be huge, so you can potentially have some synergies there, and then you jump in with your E. Your Spinning Blades is going to hit everybody for a % of their max health, as well as a decent amount of damage, depending on how many stacks you can get before they engage. So, I would say for ZVZs, they're usable, but not the best. For GVGs and Hellgates, I would say Clarent Blade is just so much stronger, just because you can use a Sark with it. The damage on Dual Swords isn't actually bad, but you can use a Sarcophagus with Clarent Blade, which makes it so much tankier, and the damage is comparable. Looking at the Clarent Blade then, obviously our first tier 1 artifact. The only change, obviously, Mighty Swing. Just to compare the damage then, just to sort of talk through that. Dual Swords has a 20-second cooldown, 763 damage with 3% max health. Clarent Blade has a 15-second cooldown, 709 damage with no max health. So the damage is fairly comparable. You then mix that in with the fact that it's a bigger radius and you can use a Sarcophagus. It's just a nicer weapon to use, I think. Again, can be used in ZVZs. I would say swords in themselves are probably not the best for ZVZs. If you are going to use it, we'll talk about that in a minute on the next weapon. But for Hellgates, GVGs, Clarent Blade is so strong. If you're going to run it, I would say Assassin Jacket with Inferno Shield, as well as the Mortal Agony Stalker Hood. I would also probably say Royal Shoes, because if you do get caught out, you only really have one defensive. You want to be able to leap back and just get out of the way. So I'd say that's probably the best setup in terms of potion, Gigantifies, or Resistance, whichever one you prefer. I prefer Resistance personally. And you're going to do some serious work with this. You wait till they get to 50%. One thing to remember with Clarent Blade, though, is don't only Mighty Swing under 50%. And what I mean by that is a lot of Clarent Blades hold 3 stacks until someone gets below 50% and then uses it to finish them off or get them low. And that's a great tactic. And if you have other members of your team that can actually get them low consistently, that's really good. But if you don't, you kind of have to use the Clarent Blade as just damage. So if you can, always use your Mortal Agony before the Mighty Swing. Even if they're not below 50% to get the reduced resistances, you're still going to get the increased damage. And just use it as much as you can. You want to put that pressure out. I see more success from Clarent Blades that use it every 15 seconds than I do for people that hold it for 40 seconds for the right moment. There is a balance to strike, but I would say it's better to err on the side of aggression with Clarent Blade because of how tanky and how frontline you can be. And Carving Sword, our tier 2 Hell artifact. Two-handed sword, fearless strike, dashes towards a target location and strikes all enemies on the way, dealing 584 damage to an enemy. And depending on the number of your heroic charges, it also reduces enemy resistances. I would say this is probably the best EVZ weapon swords have. Maybe Galatine pair now, but I definitely like the Carving Sword. As your tanks jump in, pulls everybody to the centre. Carving Sword can kind of through them, deals a good amount of damage, going to reduce resistances. Even on 0 charges, it reduces resistances as well. And then I would say you use Royal Shoes just to get back to your team. Effectively playing like a Bloodletter. You dive in, do as much damage as you can in that dive, and then jump out to safety. So I'd say they're definitely usable in ZVZs. And like I said, it's probably one of the better options. Again, if you're going to use this one, I would actually say Splitting Slash. Just because it's two-handed, the base damage of Splitting Slash is going to be pretty damn high. And finally, Galatine Pair. Galatine Pair is the new raid artifact, the tier 3 artifact. Solar Stream slams your blades into the ground and unleash magic waves around you. Reduces enemies' current and max hit points by 20% for 7 seconds and deals magical damage. The damage scales depending on the number of heroic charges active and consumes all the charges. So 3 charges does 1239 base damage. 30-second cooldown. So it's going to be a little bit longer cooldown. However, the range is also bigger than the Clarent Blade. It does have a cast time and a very high energy cost. But that current and max hit points reduction for 7 seconds is going to be crazy, crazy good. So very, very good for ZVZs. Obviously, that's what they were built for. But in terms of Hellgates and GVGs, I would say this is actually a better Clarent Blades. You do lose a bit of defensive, so you could potentially actually swap into the Iron Will if you need that tankiness. Otherwise, Splitting Slash is going to do a crazy amount of damage. But Solar Stream, if you get into the backline or just get into the team, 9 meter range is actually a pretty big range. You're going to be able to chunk people down, and after that, you're going to be able to slaughter them. Again, you pair this with Mortal Agony, that's pretty much a one-shot onto anyone you pair it with. So yeah, talking about the swords, I would say swords are in a real good place at the moment. Broadsword's usable, but not the best. Claymore's probably one of the stronger ganking weapons. Dual swords usable in ZVZs. I wouldn't even say they're kind of mid tier. I would say they're actually bottom tier, but usable at least. Clarent Blade, one of the highest sort of popularity weapons in GVG and Hellgates. Carving Sword, usable in ZVZs. Galatine Pair is just good all round. So I'd say swords in a real good spot right now. So guys, tell me what you think about this. Hope you've enjoyed, and catch you later. Goodbye.